I should have let the dead station stay dead. By the time command finished with the official report, there was no dead station, no distress signal, no boarding team, no missing cargo, no corrupted logs, no 6-hour gap in our clocks that nobody could explain. They filed it as a navigational delay caused by magnetic interference in an unregistered dust field and sent the Alecto back out on Route 41 with a replacement relay core and 2 sealed directives. None of us were authorized to open. That was the first lesson. The state does not erase the truth because it is ashamed. It erases the truth because the truth spreads. I know that now. I am recording this because memory goes first. Not all at once. Not like in the stories. It goes in layers. You lose the shape of a room, the order of a conversation, the face of the man who sat across from you for 3 years. Then, if you are unlucky, the missing pieces come back wrong. They come back improved, smoother than the original, useful, convincing, alive in ways memory was never meant to be. So I am speaking while I can still tell the difference between what happened and what it wanted me to remember. My name is Elias Vane. I was communications officer aboard the government deep-range transport vessel, Alecto. Registry, Kepri 7, Outer Distribution Fleet. We carried machine parts, food concentrate, medical allotments, survey drones, frozen seed banks, legal records, census towers, printed law, ammunition when they did not want to call it ammunition, and sometimes sealed cargo that travelled with men who wore no insignia and never ate in the same room as us. The ship was not military, though it answered to military channels often enough. It was not exploration, though half our route maps had been edited by hand and marked with warnings older than the government that paid us. We were what the frontier always produces when a state is too thin to govern honestly. A cargo ship made to inspect, an inspection ship made to recover, a recovery ship made to lie. The Alecto was 6 decks of old metal and patched systems wrapped around a spine that vibrated when the engines were under load. It smelled of coolant, burnt dust, recycled air, machine oil, and the damp mineral tang that settles into ships which have been too long away from dock. The corridors were narrow enough that 2 people had to turn sideways to pass if one of them was carrying tools. The lighting never held a single colour. At night, cycle, the strips dimmed to an amber brown that made everyone look bruised. In hard acceleration, you could hear the hull talking to itself. I trusted that ship more than I trusted the people who built the worlds we serviced. Maybe that is why I stayed on it too long. Maybe that is why it chose us. Our route that month ran beyond the settled lanes, out past the tax colonies and water farms, past the mining belts where corporate contracts ended and state ownership began, into a section of mapped dark between the Sierra Verge and the outer stations of the Coral Reach. No one liked that road. It was too far for comfort and too poor for priority. Systems out there failed in silence. Beacons stopped reporting. Settlements disappeared from ledgers months before anyone thought to ask why. Command called it a low-density logistics corridor. Crew called it the Quiet. At 3:17 ship time, on the 9th day outbound, I heard the signal for the first time. Not the distress call, not the voice, just the break underneath everything else. I was alone in comms, running routine handshake verification against 3 government boys and 1 weather relay whose data was coming in 7 minutes late. There was nothing unusual about that. Out there, delay meant almost nothing. Signals bent, dragged, scattered, arrived stripped of context. My job was to make sense of the mess and turn it into numbers the captain could sign. I had the primary board open, long range spread across the left display, active route traffic centered, maintenance chatter muted on the right. The room was dim except for the panels and the standby strip above the hatch. Comms was one of the few compartments on the Electo built for one person. That suited me. It had no porthole and no decorative features, just arrays, diagnostic racks, 2 fold-down chairs, a drink clamp welded too close to the keyboard, and a deck plate under the central console, worn smooth where operators planted their heels on long shifts. The hum in there was steady and intimate. The ship sounded different in comms, as if it were breathing through its teeth. I was halfway through logging buoy K-12's checksum mismatch when something moved under the static. I do not mean I imagined a pattern in noise. Anyone on deep comms learns that trick in the first year and unlearns it in the second if they want to keep working. Space is full of garbage that sounds almost human. Harmonic bleed, solar chatter, reflected traffic, ghost echoes from old relays. Your brain wants to turn all of it into language. Good operators stop letting it. This was different. There was structure in it. A pulse, then a clipped burst, then a gap too deliberate to be random. It lasted maybe 3 seconds, just enough to raise the hair on my arms. I checked the board. No alert, no active inbound on the frequency where I had heard it. I rolled back the last 15 seconds and replayed the raw capture. Routine traffic, buoy telemetry, engine noise from our own systems riding the line. Static, nothing else. I replayed it again, isolating background bands, narrowing the spectrum. Still nothing. There are moments in your life you can feel trying to become important. They arrive with no ceremony. A coffee cup slips from your hand. A stranger says your name in a room where no one should know it. A panel light flickers when the rest remain steady. I remember staring at the display and thinking, absurdly, that I should write it down. Instead, I opened a maintenance ticket for minor signal contamination, tagged it low priority, and went on with the shift. That was the second lesson. The first sign is never the one you report. 3 hours later, we received the distress call. It came in on an obsolete civil emergency ban, so old most ships kept it active, only because regulations had never bothered updating the requirement. The signal was weak, intermittent, and buried under enough noise that the autofilter kicked it twice before I caught the origin marker. Station Orpheus 9. I just looked at it for a few seconds. Orpheus 9 was dead, not officially decommissioned, not currently unmanned, not awaiting reclamation. Dead. Abandoned after a fire in life support and a decompression event in its upper ring almost 19 years earlier. 42 listed casualties. 1 evacuation shuttle lost on departure. The station was left in place because towing it cost more than the ore fields around it were worth. Since then, it had drifted in a regulated exclusion pocket between 2 minor belts, too broken to save and too expensive to strip. There should have been nothing there but metal, frost, and vacuum. But the distress call kept repeating. This is Orpheus 9 civilian relay. We have survivors. Repeat, we have survivors. Docking grid unstable. Power failure in lower sectors. Immediate assistance required. This is Orpheus 9 civilian relay. The message cut off, returned, cut again. Same cadence every time. Same male voice. Mid-range, controlled, out of breath but trying not to show it. the kind of voice people use when others are listening and panic might spread. I called the bridge. Captain Sorin answered on the second chime, voice flat with interrupted concentration. Comms. I have an emergency transmission from Orpheus 9. A pause. Repeat. I did. Another pause. Longer this time. I could hear bridge air through the channel. A chair moving. Someone in the background asking for our current vector. Captain Sorin said, verify origin. Working. Verify faster, Vane. I ran source triangulation against our current bearing, checked lag, checked relay contamination, compared signal decay against known station coordinates. Every indicator landed within acceptable error margins. If someone was spoofing the source, they were doing it with access to a level of precision nobody out there should have possessed. It's coming from the station, I said. That got me 3 seconds of silence. Then, bring me the audio. By the time I reached the bridge with the file, the first officer had already pulled the old station records. Captain Sorin stood at the center display with one hand on the rail, broad-shouldered and motionless, the way he always stood when he was angry enough to be careful with it. He was not a dramatic man. He had command because he treated every problem as a weight distribution issue. Something too heavy on one side, you shifted it. Something unstable, you locked it down. Men like that do well until they meet a thing that does not care about balance. I played the message. No one spoke during it. The first officer, Leto, was the one who finally broke the silence. It's a loop. All emergency calls are loops, I said. No, she said, eyes fixed on the waveform. I mean the whole thing. Voice stress, breathing, electrical profile. It's too clean, like a reconstructed loop. Captain Sorin looked at me. Can you confirm live modulation? Not from this sample. Do it. He did not have to say the rest. If the signal was live, we were obligated to investigate. Frontier emergency codes overruled nearly everything, including route efficiency, sealed freight priority, and common sense. The old rules assumed the universe was mostly indifferent, and that a distress call meant desperate humans in a solvable situation. The old rules were written before places learned how to answer back. I went back to comms and opened a live response handshake on the emergency band. Orpheus 9. This is government vessel Alecto, receiving your distress call. Respond with casualty count and current environmental status. Static. Then the same message resumed. I repeated the hail on secondary language packs and stripped format. Nothing. I injected a challenge tone and waited for the station to return its authentication sequence. No response. I tried a dirty handshake, the kind salvage crews use with half-dead systems that can still mimic old protocols. For a moment, all I heard was noise. Then something shifted. The static lowered, as if a mouth had moved closer to a microphone. And a voice that was not on the original loop said, very clearly, please. Just that. Not loud, not distorted. A man's voice, low and raw with exhaustion. Please. I froze with my hand over the board. Orpheus 9, I said. Identify. Full. Nothing. Then the loop began again. This is Orpheus 9 civilian relay. We have survivors. I sent the recording to the bridge, and for the first time that day, felt afraid. Not because of the word, because of how it had been spoken. Not panicked, not relieved, not hopeful, like something remembering how begging was supposed to sound. We altered course within the hour. No one liked it, but nobody argued. The route could absorb the delay. The law could not ignore the call. A dead station transmitting live emergency traffic from a sealed exclusion pocket was exactly the kind of thing Command would later demand, to know why we had failed to inspect. So we turned. The Electo changed vector with the deep metal groan all old ships make when guidance thrusters push against habits built over years. Loose fittings clicked in the walls. Somewhere below us, a cargo lock complained. In the mess, mugs slid half a centimeter across tables and stopped. I remained in comms, tracking the station as it came in and trying not to replay the single word I had captured between loops. Please. Every operator hears desperate voices in their sleep, sooner or later. Mining collapses, pressure loss, piracy, colony riots, relay towers burning while the local administrator insists everything is under control. Voices do not get to you because they are emotional. They get to you because they are ordinary. A man asking if anyone can still hear him. A woman listing names so somebody will know who was alive at the end. Children in background corridors. People always imagine fear sounds dramatic. Mostly it sounds busy. This was not busy. This sounded rehearsed by something that had listened carefully. By the time Orpheus 9 came within direct scan range, the distress loop had changed. Not much. Enough. The words were the same. The gaps were not. Breaths appeared in places they had not been before. Small ones. Human ones. At first, I thought the system was degrading under retransmission. Then I overlaid the newest sample against the first file and saw the pattern. The loop was adjusting to our replies. The station was not playing back a recording. It was listening. I took that to Captain Sorin. He watched the comparisons in silence, thumb rubbing once over the scar by his jaw. Could be packet corruption, Leto said. It's not, I said. She glanced at me. You sound sure. I am. Captain Sorin asked, can it imitate a live exchange? Not well, I said. Not yet. Nobody commented on that word. Yet. The station appeared on visual 10 minutes later, a dark geometry turning slowly against the scatter of a thin ice field. Orpheus 9 had been built in the old Trident style. Central spine, habitat ring, 3 docking arms extending outward like broken fingers. 2 of those arms were gone now, sheared clean and black at the roots. The habitat ring was split in 1 quadrant, a crescent of frozen debris still clinging to the wound. The station rotated with a gentle, corpse-like dignity. Solar veins shattered, hull blistered by age and micrometeor damage. No running lights, no obvious thermal bloom, no life. And yet 1 docking beacon winked on as we approached. Just 1. A small blue light on the surviving lower arm. Power spike in docking sector, I said. From emergency reserves? Sorin asked. I checked. No. Internal redistribution. Leto muttered something under her breath I did not catch. Captain Sorin made the decision the way practical men always do, when standing at the edge of the irrational. He cut the problem into pieces small enough to pretend they could still be managed. No full docking. No blind boarding. We would maintain offset position and run remote diagnostics first. If station systems responded cleanly, He would authorize a limited team to inspect life support, power routing, and central relay access. Recover survivors, if survivors existed. Extract if anything looked wrong. Anything looked wrong already, but that no longer mattered. On the approach, I kept an open line on the emergency frequency. The loop continued. We have survivors. We have survivors. We have survivors. The same voice every time, but not exactly the same. The edges softened each repetition. The urgency became more intimate, like it had begun speaking to a smaller room. When we reached 1,000 meters, the station sent us docking clearance on a code format 6 years out of service. When we rejected it, the station sent it again. At 700 meters, the internal thermal scan lit up. Not life signs. Not quite. Warm structures appeared in the lower residential blocks and along one service corridor near central transit. A handful of shapes at first, then more, as if systems were waking in sequence. They were too diffuse for clean biological identification, moving in and out of resolution behind old insulation and layered hull. Leto stared at the display. That many survivors wouldn't still have heat after 19 years. No, Soren said. Scan error, I asked. He looked at me. Are you asking me, Mr. Vane? No, Captain. He kept watching the screen. Good. We launched the drones. 2 standard inspection units and 1 cutter drone, modified for hull breach work. They crossed the gap under remote guidance, cold thrusters flashing in short white bursts, and disappeared through the half-open maintenance aperture beneath the active docking arm. Their feeds came through comms, so the images passed my board before they reached the bridge. I wish I could tell you something dramatic happened right away, that the video cut to blood on the walls, or bodies fused into metal, or some impossible growth moving through the station. It would be easier if horror announced itself honestly. Instead, the first thing the drones showed us was order. The maintenance shaft was clear. The corridor beyond it was intact. Emergency strips glowed a low amber along the floor. Frost climbed the walls in delicate branching ribs, but bulkhead doors remained sealed. Pressure readouts in the green across 3 adjacent sectors. A drop toolkit floated in one junction, bumping lightly against a handrail every few seconds. There was even a cup strapped inside a galley recess, half full of something black turned to crystal. The place looked abandoned, not ruined. Abandonment is worse. Ruin means violence, a break, an ending. Abandonment means there was time for people to leave things where they expected to return. Drone 1 reached the lower transit corridor and panned left. There were handprints on the wall, dozens of them. Not smeared, pressed, layer over layer, overlapping in clusters at shoulder height, as if people had stood there quietly, placing their hands against the metal, one after another. Adult hands. Some smaller ones. Frost had gathered around the edges, preserving the shapes in white halos. The bridge went silent. Leto said, "What am I looking at?" No one answered. The drones continued. In residential Block C, every cabin door stood open. Inside the rooms, beds were stripped. Storage lockers hung unlatched. Personal items drifted in slow loops through stale air. A child's fabric tether toy, a deck of printed cards, a torn shirt, a framed image cracked through the center. Not looted, not tossed in panic, just left. Drone 2 entered the communal mess. All the chairs had been turned to face the same wall. Nothing was on that wall. No screen. No notice panel. No shrine. Just a blank section of stained plating. Dead and featureless under emergency light. I heard my own breath over the bridge channel before I realized my mic was still live. Captain Sorin said, "Mute personal audio." I did. Drone 3, the cutter unit, reached central relay access and attempted a system port. The station answered with a handshake that used our encryption seed. Not the government's. Ours. The Electo's current ship handshake. Fresh cycle. Not something Orpheus 9 could have known unless it had already been inside our comms. I stared at the authentication exchange, reading it twice, because the numbers did not make sense the first time. "Captain," I said. He was already looking at me through the bridge cam. "Say it." It just answered on our internal seed. Leto stepped toward my display. "That's impossible." "Yes." "Then say something else." I routed the exchange to the bridge. Sorin watched the numbers resolve and did not speak for a long moment. Then he said, "Prepare boarding team." That was the third lesson. Once a thing has reached inside your systems, human beings become desperate to confront it physically, as if the eye can succeed where instruments fail, as if terror becomes manageable when it can be pointed at. I was ordered onto the team because the relay core sat directly off central comms, and the station's signal behavior fell under my authority. The others were Harker from engineering, because if anything on Orpheus 9 still had power, he could tell whether it was stable, and Dane, security adjunct, because regulations demand someone armed whenever a government crew boards an unverified structure. Captain Sorin remained aboard to maintain command oversight. Leto would handle tether operations and extraction timing. I dressed in silence in the ready bay, while Harker swore quietly at a suit seal that would not sit right. Dane checked his sidearm twice. Not because he was nervous, but because repetition gave him a moral framework. Men like Dane do not trust mysteries. They trust procedures and the force required when procedures fail. "Think we actually have survivors?" Harker asked nobody in particular. No one answered. He tugged one glove into place and looked at me. "You heard the voice. What do you think?" I should have lied. "I think something is using the station," I said. Harker held my gaze for a second too long, then looked away. "That's helpful." Dane sealed his visor. "If it's using it, it can stop when I tell it to." I remember that line because later, much later, I found part of it in a corrupted audio fragment from a world Dane never lived to see. The shuttle crossing took less than 4 minutes. Orpheus 9 grew around us as we approached the lower docking arm, hull scars bright in our floodlights, debris sparkling in the dark like frozen ash. Up close, the station looked less abandoned than exhausted. Plates had buckled inward in some places and peeled back in others, exposing cable bundles turned black with vacuum burn. Our chosen airlock stood slightly open, just enough for automated couplers to take hold without forcing the mechanism. Leto's voice came through the channel. External pressure, stable in annex corridor. Internal readings, unreliable. Past second bulkhead. Team acknowledges. We acknowledged. The airlock received us. That was the first wrongness you could feel with the body. Dead stations do not receive. The outer door sealed behind the shuttle with a clean hydraulic lock. Pressure equalization began almost immediately. Not a hiss from failing reserves. A measured cycle, regulated and confident, like a place doing what it had always been built to do. Harker said, "That shouldn't have power." No one replied. When the inner hatch opened, station air touched my suit. Old air has weight to it. Even through filtration, you can smell time. Stale polymers, trapped moisture, dust that has not moved in years. But there was something else in it too, beneath the dry cold. A faint, organic sweetness. Not rot. More like wet leaves sealed in plastic. The annex corridor was narrow, ice-webbed, and lit by floor strips pulsing a dim amber. The walls bore the old civil colours, faded blue beneath soot and scratch marks. Someone had painted over the original directional signage in black hash lines years ago, perhaps during the emergency, perhaps after. A cargo sled sat against one side, with its straps neatly fastened over nothing at all. We moved towards central transit, boots ringing softly. There were no bodies, no blood, no obvious signs of violence, only evidence of departure, organized around something stranger than panic. Lockers opened and left open, tools arranged in rows on the floor. A line of shoes set outside a bunk room door, paired carefully, heel to heel. In the first major junction, we found the source of the thermal readings. Not people, the station gardens. Every old civilian station had some version of them. Stacked hydroponic columns, nutrient beds, emergency greens for oxygen supplementation, and ration extension if supply lines failed. Orpheus 9's lower gardens should have been dead for decades. Instead, they were alive. Not healthy, alive. Pale vine structures had grown out through the mesh walls, threading themselves along the corridor ceiling in white braided ropes. Leaves the color of scar tissue, pressed flat against the lighting strips. Bulbous root masses swelled from cracked nutrient trays and pulsed almost invisibly, like muscle remembering a rhythm. Condensation beaded on them in trembling rows. Harker stopped so abruptly, I nearly walked into him. What the hell am I looking at? His helmet light moved over the growth, and the vines shifted. Not fast. Not enough to be certain. Just a small tightening along one branch where the light lingered. My stomach turned cold. Dane raised his weapon. Movement. Do not fire unless ordered. Soren's voice came from the channel. It moved. So did you. Harker knelt beside a ruptured tray, scanner out. These aren't standard station cultivars. Tissue density is wrong. They've integrated with the plumbing. Can you trace power uptake? I asked. Harker did not answer right away. Then, it's drawing current through the irrigation grid. The station was feeding it. We kept moving. At the entrance to Central Transit, we found the first person. He was standing at the far end of the corridor, with one hand resting on the wall. A man in a station utility suit, visor open, face pale in the amber light. For one instant, one terrible, hopeful instant, my body believed him. Believed in survivors, in explanation, in some astonishing pocket of endurance preserved inside this dead shell. Then he lifted his head. His eyes were open too wide. Not bulging, not damaged. Just held open with a steadiness no living person ever maintains. His skin had the soft, waxen texture of something recently thawed. There was no visible injury. except a dark seam at the base of his throat disappearing under the collar. He smiled at us, not in relief, in recognition. "Thank God," he said, and his voice was the same voice from the loop. Dane moved first, stepping forward, weapon up but angled low. "Hands where I can see them." The man's smile widened by a fraction that should have been impossible to notice through a visor, and at that distance. But I noticed it. I think all of us did. He said, "You took longer this time." "This time?" I asked before I could stop myself. Captain Sorin snapped over comms. "Vane, no direct engagement." The man's gaze shifted to me, and I knew with the hard certainty of sudden illness, that he had not been looking at the team before. He had been listening for my voice. "We've been trying to tell you," he said. Then the corridor lights went out. Not failed. Went out. All at once. In sequence. As if switched by hand. Emergency red flooded on a second later. Sharp and arterial. Dane cursed. Harker backed into me. Our helmet lamps stuttered against walls now glistening with a reflective film I could have sworn had not been there a breath before. The man at the end of the corridor was gone. In his place, the vines along the ceiling convulsed. They dropped like cable bundles cut loose. White lengths slapped across the deck, walls, our legs. One wrapped Harker's arm and tightened so violently I heard him cry out through the comms. Dane fired twice. The corridor flashed blue-white. The rounds tore through vine tissue and the wall behind it, spraying clear fluid that steamed against our suit lights. Then the station began to speak. Not over radio. Through the walls. Voices burst from every panel speaker at once. Men, women, children. Overlapping. Out of sync. All using the same calm emergency cadence. "We have survivors. Docking grid unstable. Immediate assistance required. Please, please, please." Harker screamed that something had gone through his suit. Dane hacked at the vine around him with a utility blade. I tried to reach the relay junction to cut local power and slipped on the film coating the deck. Oh, my glove hit the floor. It was warm. Warm. On a dead station, 19 years cold. "Team extract," Sorin ordered. "Now." But the corridor behind us had sealed. Bulkhead door down. No warning. I remember the sound more than the sight. That final metal slam in a station that, by all law and logic, should not have had the strength to move any of its own mass. Dane fired at the control panel. Nothing. Harker fell to one knee, clawing at the suit joint under his left arm. The vine there had withdrawn, leaving no visible breach, but his biomonitor was spiking so hard the numbers blurred. "I can't feel my hand," he said. "Get up," Dane barked. "I can't." The voices in the walls changed. No more loop. Now, they were trying on language. "Don't leave," a woman said from a speaker above us. Then, from somewhere near the floor, we waited. Then, very close to my ear, though nothing was there, Elias. My name, not through comms. Inside the helmet audio line, where only ship-linked channels should have had access. I think that was the moment I understood. we had not boarded an infected station. We had entered a mouth. Harker's breathing turned wet and frantic. He was staring at his own reflection in the visor glass, mumbling that he could hear roots in the water lines. Dane grabbed him under the shoulder and hauled him up. I reached the manual override box on the sealed bulkhead and tore the panel cover away. Old station hardware. Mechanical backup under the electronic system. My hands moved before thought. Release pin, crank port, emergency disengage. The box was empty. No mechanism inside at all. Just a dark cavity, lined with that same pale fibrous growth from the gardens, packed neatly where the gears should have been. It had replaced the station from the inside out. Back route, I shouted. Transit junction, maintenance shaft. Dane dragged Harker. I led. The corridor behind us writhed with slow white movement, vines drawing themselves together across the deck as if herding us. The speakers kept talking in fractured attempts at reassurance. Stay where you are. We can help. You are received. At the transit junction, the handprints on the wall gleamed wet under red light. Not frost now. Fresh moisture. One of the smaller prints lifted. Not detached. Emerged. A child-sized hand, pale and half-formed from the wall growth itself, pressed outward from the metal and opened once like a waking thing. Dane fired again. The hand burst apart. Something moved in the wall behind it. A mass withdrawing through the structure with a sound like soaked cloth dragged through pipes. We made the maintenance shaft and forced the hatch. Inside, the air was hotter. The fibrous growth had spread through the conduits, wrapping cables, thickening around valve clusters, pulsing in faint synchronized contractions that ran away from our lights deeper into the station. Harker had stopped answering questions. His breathing came in sharp little catches. His left glove kept clenching and unclenching around empty air. Leto was shouting in our ears now. I'm losing your positional telemetry. Repeat, I'm losing... Her voice cut out, replaced by my own. Please, my voice said in the channel. Please. Dane physically shoved me forward. We crawled the shaft on hands and knees, dragging Harker between us, while the station fed us our own voices in broken fragments. My first distress hail, Soren's command codes, Leto's laugh from some mess hall recording months old, bits of us, rearranged, tested, returned. At one junction, Harker stopped moving entirely. I thought he had blacked out. Then he turned his helmet toward me. The visor was fogged, but through it, I could see his eyes open too wide. He said, in a voice far calmer than he had any right to possess, "It's not dead anywhere." Dane tried to pull him. Harker did not resist. He simply braced one hand against the shaft wall, and white filaments bloomed under his glove, spreading through the suit seam like frost racing across glass. I still hear the sound Dane made when he realized what he was seeing. It was not fear. It was disgust, deep enough to become rage. He drew the emergency cutter from his belt and severed Harker's tether. Not his suit line, his body tether. The snap line linking us together in the shaft. Harker drifted back into the red dark, one hand still braced on the wall, eyes fixed on me through the fogged visor. Then the shaft behind him, closed with moving white growth, and he was gone. There are deaths that belong to the dead, and there are deaths that keep working long after. We reached the annex airlock 6 minutes later, though the ship clocks would later insist it took less than 90 seconds. The shuttle was still docked. The hatch was open. That should have saved us. Instead, we found the pilot's seat occupied by Harker. No suit, no visible wound. Just Harker, seated with both hands folded in his lap, head tilted slightly, as if listening to a sound beyond hearing. Dane actually laughed once, a short, broken noise. "That's not possible," he said. No one on the channel answered him. The thing wearing Harker looked up. Its mouth moved a fraction too late for the words that came out. "Docking grid stable," it said politely. "You can come in." Dane fired until the slide locked back. The rounds tore Harker's chest open and punched through the seat frame. No blood, only pale thread-like structures recoiling through the cavity, bunching and pulling deeper as the body collapsed sideways. I sealed the shuttle manually. Dane launched before the outer lock had fully cycled, scraping the hull so hard alarms shrieked through the cabin. Behind us, through the shuttle's rear cam, Orpheus 9's docking beacon went dark. Then every window on the station lit up at once. Thousands of them. Warm yellow rectangles opening across the dead habitat, ring like evening in a city. And in those windows, shapes stood watching us leave. The official report says we recovered one casualty and were forced to abandon remains due to structural instability. That is not true. We recovered something in Harker's suit. Not much. A dusting of pale material in the arm joint where the vine had touched him. Tissue too organized to be fungus, too electrically active to be root, too responsive to stimulus to be dead. By the time the medtech flagged abnormal conductivity, the sample had already spread along the inside of the containment tray in branching lines that resembled circuitry more than growth. Captain Sorin sealed the bay, transmitted priority notice to command, and put the whole ship under internal movement restrictions. Then the clocks changed. Every system on the Electo lost 6 hours. Not corrupted logs, not desync between decks. Actual ship-wide temporal record discontinuity. Camera archives skipped. Engine telemetry folded over itself. Personal devices jumped from 1402 to 2011 with no transitional data. And in those missing hours, something had used comms to broadcast on local bands. Not distress. Invitations. By then, Orpheus 9 was gone from external scope. Not exploded. Not drifted. Gone. The exclusion pocket, where it had been contained debris, trace ice, and an active beacon transmitting our current ship handshake into empty space. Command ordered silence. We were to proceed to the nearest secure relay, surrender all raw logs, submit to debrief, and discuss the event with no one outside command channels. Standard language. Too fast to be standard. That was how I knew this was not the first time. You asked why I did not leave then. Why I stayed aboard after Orpheus 9. After Harker. After the 6 missing hours. And the voices in the walls. Because men like me do not resign from the frontier. There is nowhere for us to go that the frontier has not already touched. And because some part of me, the ruined part perhaps, needed to know whether the station had spoken the truth. It had said We took longer this time. I did not understand that then. I thought it was imitation. I thought it was trying on us like a mask. I did not yet understand that whatever lived in the black distance did not meet ships one by one. It met patterns, routes, states, civilizations. It had been listening for a very long time. And when we answered Orpheus 9, it finally found a voice it wanted to keep. This is part 1 then. The dead station. The first boarding. The beginning, if beginnings matter. I can still picture the windows lighting up across that ruined ring. All those warm, domestic squares opening in the cold, like someone welcoming us home. I can still hear Harker saying it. It's not dead anywhere. At the time, I thought he meant the station. I know better now. And if you are hearing this, if this record reached you intact, then there is one more thing I need you to understand before I go on. We did not bring contamination back from Orpheus 9. That would have been simpler. The truth is worse. It was already on the ship before we ever changed course.